afternoon. We will commence by reciting the Gayatri Mantra. Let's chant Om 3 times. Om. Om. Om Bhurbhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhyo Yo Na Prachodayat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Our speaker tonight, Pandit Kiran Satgur, is the president of the Veda Dharma Sabha, Pietermaritzburg, and the vice president of the Arya Samaj, South Africa. Ved Dharam Sabha, Pietermaritzburg, was founded in 1909 by the visiting missionary Swami Shankaran. To date, Ved Dharam's Shankaran. To date, Ved Dharam Sabha, Pietermaritzburg, is active and has a strong religious, social, and political platform. Tonight's speaker, Pandit Satgur, holds a diploma in business management and journalism and holds certificates in junior staff and warfare and in senior military management. Panditji also studied at the School of Vedic Studies. Pandit Satgur was a member of the Natal Indian Congress in his youth, who contributed to the birth of our South African democracy. Also a retired South African National Defence Force chaplain and entrepreneur, Panditji is most qualified to present tonight's lecture, Raj Dharma, the Science of Government. I now hand you over to Panditji. Panditji.
My prem namaste to Pandit Usha Harikaran, our coordinator for this evening on the Back to the Vedas. Also, my prem namaste to all the officials of the Arya Samaj South Africa and members that have joined us this evening. Also, my namaste to our guests and visitors that have also joined us as participants. Dear friends, I feel very honored to be selected to present this paper on Raj Dharma, and I must say that it has given me a huge insight just doing the research and the reading on Raj Dharma. It has given me an insight further into the thinking of Swami Dayanand Saraswati, and also the Satyarth Prakash, or the Light of Truth, which is an amazing book. If you haven't read it, and I would suggest that you try and get your hands on it and actually go through it, because it is a wonderful piece of literature that has been written by a great man and a great soul. In the Satyarth Prakash, chapter 6, it deals with Raj Dharma, and that is the science of government. And while writing this chapter, Swami Dayanand Saraswati quotes from the 4 Vedas. That's the Rig Veda, the Yajur Veda, the Atharva Veda, and the Shatapad Brahmanas. And he also refers to the Manusmriti to remind the kings of his time about their duties and qualifications. And as Manu says, and I quote, "Let a Kshatriya whose knowledge, culture, and piety are as perfect as those of a Brahmana govern the country with perfect justice." So, dear friends, I'm going to flip to my PowerPoint presentation, which will give us an indication of the information that we will be focusing on this evening. If you can just give me a second. Raj Dharma is an ethical approach of governance in the Back to the Vedas series, which has been presented for quite a while now in Arya Samaj South Africa. My introduction is, and it covers the first part of the Raj Dharma, which emphasizes the principles of a just and a righteous rule by a monarch or a ruler. And so, in this research that was done for Raj Dharma, Swamiji focuses on the duty of a king or a monarch or a ruler. And in this chapter, he elaborates on the concept of dharmic way of living, and which refers to the duties and responsibilities of a ruler or a king. And the chapter outlines the principles and guidelines that a just and righteous king should adhere to while governing his kingdom and his subjects. So we have established that the source of authority was a monarch or a king. But he makes it very clear, this king is not absolute, but it comes from a higher source, such as the Almighty Paramatma or the divine principles of justice. Therefore, the king or the leader or the ruler should rule with the welfare of his subjects in mind, acting as a servant of the people rather than being an autocrat. So, in his role or in his duty as a king or as a leader, his role is spread out over these various points that I've listed. One of them is the protection of our dharma. And the primary duty is to protect and promote our dharma, which is made up of righteousness or a moral order. The leader must ensure that justice prevails in society and uphold the principles of truth, honesty, and ethical conduct. And so, whilst he was doing his research and he was presenting his structure on how government should be structured, he came up with the Council of Dharma. And this council would deal with matters related to religious and moral laws. It would be responsible for upholding and propagating the principles of dharma, and that is righteousness in our society and ensuring adherence to ethical and spiritual values. So this was one of the councils that he promoted, and this was called the Council of Dharma. So the leader also had a responsibility to the well-being and safety of the subjects, which was of utmost importance. A just leader should work towards the welfare and prosperity of its people and ensure that their basic needs are met at all times. He advises that a leader or a king should treat all his subjects equally, regardless of their social status, caste, or creed. So there wasn't a breakdown on society that was a higher caste or lower caste, or you were of this area of expertise, you were treated equally. There should be no discrimination based on birth, and justice should be dispensed fairly to all. When we look at the elimination of social evils, it is the duty of the leader to eradicate evil practices and customs from society. He must work towards the abolition of social evils and encourage the adoption of progressive and righteous practices. This is something that every leader should actually have as part of their whole program, and that is he must work towards the removal of social evils. And what are some of the social evils that we have? When you look at in the current day, and I'm sure even at that time, it was the suppression of the weaker sex, it was vices in community and society. So it was their duty to get to remove these evils and work towards a progressive and righteous practices. The other council, the first council I said that he motivated for was the council of Dharma. And the second council that he motivated for was called the Council of Education. And this council would be responsible for overseeing educational institutions and ensuring the promotion of knowledge, learning, and the intellectual development in society. It would focus on preserving and disseminating Vedic knowledge, scriptures, and other relevant literature. Now, the Council of Education, as you can see, is the basis of our community and society. It was something that would have given an opportunity to the masses and to everyone, an opportunity to be in a space of learning and education. So in the Council of Education, we are saying they emphasize on the importance of knowledge. A king should support the educational institutions and encourage the spread of knowledge in his area of expertise or the kingdom. Not so long ago, I'm sure most of you from the past now, we come into the present. You would have seen a video clip that came out from an area in India called Noida. And this is a region that is run by a Swami. Actually, he's the chief minister. And they've created a theme park based on the Vedas. And yet we are in this century, and this has been created. So it tells you that the thirst for the Vedic knowledge, the exposition of the Vedic knowledge, not only is just being done now, it was from that time. And so as we move on and we look at the structure of the Raj Dharma, one of the most important aspects was the maintenance of a defense system. The ruler should maintain a strong and disciplined army to protect the kingdom from external threats and maintain law and order within its realm. You should also look at avoiding conquest for selfish gain, and he discouraged wars and conquest for selfish reasons, such as amassing wealth or expanding territories. He believes that wars should only be fought to defend the kingdom and its principles of righteousness. So here again, you look at an important facet, an important part of a society that needs protection. So the military aspect of it should be a disciplined one, it should be a strong one, but purely for protection purposes, to maintain law and order, and also not with an intention to start expanding territory or taking over other people or other kingdoms, like what the people of that period or era, or even before that, experienced invaders that came in from different regions. But it was purely for defense purposes, defend the kingdom and its principles of goodwill and righteousness. Just taxation. When we look at taxation, the leader or the king should impose taxes responsibly and fairly. Taxation should be used for the welfare of the people and the development of the kingdom. So these are some of the principles that Swamiji laid out in his Satyar Prakash for the role of a leader or a king or let's just stick to the leader or a monarch, right? So the principles outlined in this chapter 6 of the Satyar Prakash advocates for a just, ethical, and responsible rule, with the welfare and progress of the people as the primary focus. So it has a significant impact on the Indian, whatever he thought of, it had a significant impact on the Indian nationalist movement and continued to be revered by many followers of the Arya Samaj and others interested in the Indian philosophy of governance. And so as we move on from just taxation, we now move on to the science of government. And when we look at the science of government, Swamiji wrote that self-government is the best government. And he says, howsoever just, kind, and impartial a foreign government might be, it can never give full insight or full happiness to its subject. And in his prayer, he says, the Lord of the universe, may you give us the strength and energy and courage and will, knowledge, patience, and political intelligence, so that we may be free of foreign rule and no foreign power may ever rule over us again. This was from the Yajur Ved. Any foreign government, according to him, means only suffering and misery for the people. It governs any people, any government on this earth. A foreign government cannot and will not rule for the good of the people, and it will rule only for itself and the good of its parent country. So a foreign government thrives on the division and exploitation of the people for the simple reason that it is not a government of the people, by the people, for the people. There is no substitute for self-government. And this is from Swami Dayanand in the Granth Mala 1/344. So he goes further to state, who constitutes the government of a free country? It is the people who are the authority behind the government. And it is the people and the government who rule the country in cooperation and interdependence. The Vedic idea of a self-governing country or a nation is called Vidhata, a systematic organization of the people and the government for the purpose of dharma, which is the protection and the advancement of the freedom, welfare, happiness, knowledge, and education, justice, exercise of the rights and duties of all individually and collectively, in a state of freedom from poverty, ignorance, and injustice. This is from the Yajur Ved 33/34. So this tells you that this is the Vedic injunction of how a country or a society should be ruled. He goes further to say that the government exists for the people, for the exercise of the collective dharma, and the exercise of the rights and duties of the people individually and collectively. The purpose of the government is the protection and advancement of the people's freedom, happiness and welfare with knowledge and education, the rule of law for justice, security and peace, and economic well-being. So all suffering arises, one, from ignorance, injustice, and poverty. So if a government cannot guarantee for the people freedom from poverty, ignorance, fear, and injustice, and if it cannot create the environment in which they can freely exercise their rights and fully perform their duties, it has no right to exist. So this tells you, and this shows, that Swamiji actually used the Yajurved, the Atharva Ved, for guidance in terms of his interpretation of the science of government. So let's just look at the Council of Governance. And this is the third one that he said that we need to set up. The Council of Governance and Administration. This council would have executive authority and manage the day-to-day affairs of the government. It would deal with law enforcement, public administration, and other administrative functions. He emphasized that a government should be based on rationality, justice, and adherence to the principles of dharma. It should be a welfare state that works for the betterment of its citizens and upholds righteousness in all its actions. And when you look at the science of government, he then breaks it down further by going down and looking at the qualifications of the head of the state. So when you look at a head of a state, it must be a person with standing, education, experience, and obviously somebody who can control, manage, and delegate. So he says that the ruler or the head of the state should possess certain essential qualities. They must be knowledgeable, they must be wise, they must be just, and they must be impartial. The ruler should be a person of high moral character, devoted to the welfare of the people, and should lead by example. So when we look at the rule of law, he emphasized the importance of the rule of law, which means that everyone, including the ruler, is subject to the law and no one is above it. The law should be fair, it should be impartial, and uniformly applicable to all, regardless of the status or position. There should be no exemptions. If you do wrong, you could be the highest officer in the land, then you must pay for your wrongdoings. So the chief officers and the officials. He advocated for a well-organized government structure with clear divisions and responsibilities. There should be designated officers for specific tasks, such as the Chief of Defense, the Chief of Finance, and Administration, each headed by qualified individuals. Now, here's a man of vision. He already started structuring how a government and how society should be ruled or controlled or managed. And he looked at the key portfolios, but most important, he looked at the quality of individuals that would be heading these positions, which were key positions. And when we look at the ruler or the president, he suggested a monarchical form of government where virtuous and qualified rulers would be at the helm. So virtue is one of them that was the keynote that he looked at. The person that was at the helm, acting as the head of the state, would be responsible for upholding our dharma, our way of life, and ensuring the welfare of the people. And so when he goes down to the members of the council, and the members of each council must be learned and wise individuals who possess expertise in their respective fields. He emphasized the importance of knowledge, he emphasized the importance of honesty, and most important of all, he emphasized integrity in the members of the council. It is very, very clear that in the way society or the way he looked at a dharma, a Raj Dharma should be structured, and what comes out of it is that there is honesty, there's integrity, but one other most important thing came out is that you just don't take anybody and put them in a position, but you take somebody who has got some sort of education or experience. Let's look at now the qualification of members of the political assembly. The members of the political assembly, or the representatives that come from the different areas or the ministerial portfolios that they would be holding, should be individuals of a very high moral character. They should have the knowledge of the portfolio that they are managing. And I think the last and the most important thing that he mentioned was integrity, the ability to deal with people on a fair and just manner without any option to be swayed in your decision making. They should be elected by the people through a fair and transparent process. Here again, not just taking people and putting them in positions because of personal interests, because of friendship, but because of transparency. They should be appointed to positions because they are there accountable to the people and the government. Ministers should be selected based on their qualification, experience, and abilities. They must be well versed in statecraft, possess a sense of responsibility, and be dedicated to the welfare of the people. Here again, it's very important. The focus is not on individuals enriching themselves or individuals in a status or an egocentric position where it's all about themselves. But who comes first, and in everything that Swamiji wrote, is that the people must be served and the people come first at all times. So the duties of ministers and other officials. The ministers and officials are expected to perform the duties firstly with honesty, diligence, and sincerity. It is human to err, but let me tell you, if you hold public office, you shouldn't err. You should be there to perform your duties honestly and to be diligent about what you're doing, and you should be sincere in whatever you stand for. Their primary focus should be the welfare, once again, of the people and the betterment of the state. Swami Dayanand advises against nepotism and favoritism in appointing officials. So he was very clear in the quality of leadership, in the quality of people that held posts and positions. So we come to the other most important part, and that is the management of revenue, finances, and taxation. The revenue should be collected from the people through just and reasonable taxation. They should not be exploited, but obviously there should be an imposition of some sort of taxes. Taxation should be used for the welfare of the citizens and the development of the state. The collection of taxes should be transparent and the funds should be utilized efficiently. He also goes further to state that justice and the administration of the justice system should be accessible to all and delivered impartially. The judiciary should be independent of the ruling or the governing part of the country. The judiciary should be an independent organ and free from any influence whatsoever. The legal system should be based on the principles of Dharma, ensuring free trials and equitable judgments. So there again, a man of vision. He's obviously taken all this information from scripture, and he's also seen the need for having justice and administration of justice as an independent organ and an independent part of our governance. Swami Dayanand's vision of governance revolves around principles, and again I say it, of righteousness, justice, and welfare of the people. His ideas on Raj Dharma laid the foundation for many reformist movements in India, and they continue to be relevant in discussions about good governance and ethical leadership to date. I want to just do a comparison because the Vedas is the source of knowledge and the Satyar Prakash came well after that. Oh, by the way, I just missed out one on punishment. He said that even punishment must be done on a basis where it should be humane and not in an unjust manner. So let's go back to the Vedas and the Satyar Prakash, which are two distinct sources that offer insights into principles of good governance, and their perspectives differ from modern political ideologies like democracy, socialism, and dictatorship. It is important to note that the Vedas are an ancient Hindu scripture, while the Satyar Prakash is a more recent work written by Swami Dayanand in this 19th century. And being a social reformer, his thinking was one that was advanced for his time. So when we look at the Vedas on the principles of good governance, the Vedas primarily focus on spiritual and moral principles rather than specific governance structures. However, they do contain some indirect guidance on leadership qualities and righteous governance. The concept of Raj Dharma, the duties of a ruler, is often discussed, emphasizing the responsibility of the rulers to uphold justice, protect the weak, and promote the well being of the people. The Vedas emphasize values like truthfulness, non-violence, compassion, and selflessness, which are seen as essential qualities for a just and wise ruler. So let's now focus on the Satyar Prakash on the principles of good governance. The Satyar Prakash, written by Swamiji, outlines principles for a righteous and just governance system. It advocates for a system based on the Vedas and promotes the idea of a decentralized form of government with elected representatives. He was critical of hereditary rule and emphasized the importance of people's participation in governance. He called for leaders to be well educated, virtuous, and dedicated to the welfare of people. So let's look at the comparison with modern political ideologies. Democracy is one. Democracy is a political system where power is vested in the hands of the people through free and fair elections. Both the Vedas and the Satyar Prakash support the idea of governance and the consent of the governed, which aligns with democratic principles. Swamiji's vision of decentralized governance with elected representatives shares similarities with democratic ideals. And when we look at socialism, socialism advocates for collective ownership or control of resources and the means of production to ensure equitable distribution of wealth and social welfare. The Vedas and the Satyar Prakash emphasize social welfare and the well-being of all individuals, which align with some socialistic principles. Now, when we look at dictatorship, a dictatorship is a form of government where a single individual or a small group wields absolute authority, and both the Vedas and the Satyar Prakash do not explicitly endorse dictatorship, as they emphasize the importance of righteous and just rule that considers the welfare of the people. Now, as we find that trends and times have changed, certain forms of management or governance has changed to different ways. And this has created what we call civil unrest in many countries. If you look at the different continents, you will find that there are some countries which in its independence are running smoothly, but there are some that has civil unrest. Then there is another very important aspect that has come up, which is called the geopolitical influence. And this now influences how certain regions or certain areas are now being managed or controlled by political ideologies and influence. So let's look at civil unrest. This may occur in any form of government when there is a perceived lack of justice. Very important. Civil unrest will occur in any form of government when there is a perceived lack of justice, suppression of rights, or socio-economic inequalities. The principles of good governance outlined in the Vedas and the Satyar Prakash emphasizes justice, compassion, and welfare. And this could potentially help address the root causes of civil unrest if applied effectively. So we are in a situation where um, we we can say we can actually look at our um, the Vedas and the Satya Prakash in terms of helping towards quelling civil unrest and obviously having a strong influence on change in certain countries, and especially if you look at the structure of our governance. So, as for geopolitical influence, we need to understand that the Vedas and the Satya Prakash are religious texts quite old and specific to the Indian subcontinent and Indian history and culture. While they have influenced aspects of Indian society and thought, they are not direct factors in contemporary geopolitical dynamics in other regions. It does affect them. The geopolitics of India, if you look at it in this present context, but in my research, I said I'm not going to just focus on countries that are geopolitically influential or where there is civil unrest. I want this to be purely a paper that was being presented on the ideologies from the Satya Prakash and the Vedas. And if those countries that are lacking should actually refer to these, the knowledge in these texts of the Vedas and the Satya Prakash. So in summary, we look at the Vedas and the Satya Prakash and provide moral and ethical principles for good governance, with an emphasis on justice, compassion, and the welfare of its people. While they share some commonalities with modern political ideologies like democracy and socialism, they do not directly advocate for any specific political system. As with any ancient text, their interpretation and relevance in contemporary governance requires careful consideration and adaptation to the specific needs and context of each society. So, dear friends, I'm coming to the conclusion, and I would just like to just focus on Swamiji's very strong feelings on self-governance. He regarded self-government, the concept that is mentioned in the context of societal organization and governance. He believed in the idea of self-government or self-rule for the people. Understanding that he was living in a country at that time that was colonial based. So he argued that a nation should be governed by its own people, and the government should be based on the principles of justice, righteousness, and the truth as found in the Vedas. He was an advocate of democracy, and he emphasized the importance of active participation by citizens in the decision-making process. He believed that the ultimate power should lie with the people, and they should elect their representatives to government in a just and transparent manner. His ideas on self-government played a significant role in shaping the political thought of the Indian leaders during the freedom struggle against British colonial rule. And many Indian nationalists were inspired by his ideas of self-rule and democracy. It is important to note that while the concept of self-government is integral to the philosophy of Satyar Prakash, the book covers a wide range of other subjects and provides a comprehensive perspective on various aspects of life, religion, and society as envisioned by Swamiji. So, dear friends, in conclusion, I would just like to say that in his prayer, he said, and I said this before, he said, "O Lord of the universe, may you give us the strength and energy. May you give us the courage and will, knowledge, patience, and political intelligence, so that we may be free of foreign rule and no foreign power may ever rule over us again." Thank you. My prem namaste.
Ilma, if you stop sharing screen.
Yeah, I'm going to come out of that now.
Thank you, Panditi. That was very well researched and a very articulate lecture. We have several guests who have joined during the lecture, and I'd like to extend a very special welcome to each and every one of you. It is indeed heartwarming to see this many guests present, and a very special welcome to our international guests. To name a few, Mrs. Mohini Mohit Jatan from Mauritius, and Mrs. Jayanti Rampasad from Trinidad. We appreciate you taking the time off to participate and be present at our lecture today. We have some time for a few questions for Panditji. If you would like to ask a question, please indicate by clicking the raise your hand icon, and then I will unmute you. Any questions? Panditji, I have one, and it says, how does Swami Dayanand Saraswati's concept of self-governance align with the modern democratic principles, and what aspects of his ideas could be relevant and applicable in today's governance systems?
Okay. Well, when you look at his science of government, when he says that the science in his science of government and administration, he made it very clear that the council would have executive authorities and manage the day-to-day affairs of the government. It would deal with law enforcement, public administration, and other administrative functions. But he was also very strong on integrity, honesty, and also he felt that people should be voted into a position and not be put into position because of friendship or for ulterior motives. So when you look at the situation that we are placed in, and as I said, I don't want to compare countries or anything of that sort, but because we can read into how many countries that are actually lacking in this transparency, and we see the corruption that takes place in various areas of governance. It's because of people that are holding positions that are not qualified to manage those positions. Secondly, because there is greed and dishonesty which has crept in to many countries and many governments of the day. Thank you. So when you see concept of self-governance align with modern democratic principles, self-government Okay, that was he's also he was totally against colonial rule, and he made it very clear that with the colonial rule you did not belong, they did not own the country, or they did not rule the country for the benefit of the people, but it was purely for exploiting the country for their own ends and enrichment of their country. So that is why he motivated for self-governance at that time in India. And many Arya Samaj activists were involved in the freedom struggle of India at that time, fighting for a just country, just rule, and removal of the colonial powers of the day. Okay.
Thank you, Panditji. And I think if there's one takeaway is cast iron integrity. So I think that's absolutely vital for any person who's occupying any position, or in our day-to-day living, for that matter. So it's cast iron integrity. And there's another question I've got here, and it says,
You got quite a few hands that I've got up there.
there's another question here. In the context of self-governance, as proposed by Swami Dayanand, how can citizens actively participate in decision-making processes, and what responsibilities do they have in shaping a just and righteous society?
Okay, so if one looks at a democratic process and in the context of self-governance, firstly, how can citizens, you say, actively participate in decision-making processes? Firstly, you have a right to vote, to participate in local government, to participate in national government. So by you being part of these structures, you can influence the decision-making processes. Now, in various countries, when you are in a situation that you are not taking part, or you are boycotting, or you are just keeping away, then the wrong people come into power. The wrong people start managing certain areas of concern and certain areas of interest. And this is where the changes start taking place. And what you just said earlier on was integrity. So if you want to be a part of the change, or you want to be a part of the decision-making process, it is a responsibility of every individual not to sit back and let the next person do things, but to be proactive and to take part in different areas of interest or concern. If you are in a village or a city or wherever you are living, if there's a problem with your local governance, that doesn't stop you. You need to start becoming proactive. So that is in the context of self-governance, that every citizen needs to actively participate in change and decision making.
Thank you, Panditji. And one last question. We've got 10 minutes left. So would you say our South Africa is it a democratic government or a dictatorship?
I try to avoid the South African situation, but now you're bringing us into a nice debate. I think we must also give this, quite a few people have their hands up. But I would just like to say that, the South African context is not a dictatorship. It is a situation that it was given birth from an apartheid situation and a dictatorship. A lot of sacrifice was made, and if one reflects on a very, very important document of the past, which was called the Freedom Charter, and the Freedom Charter was not just created by one or two persons. It was, like Swamiji said, it was created and it was endorsed. It was created by the people and it was endorsed by the people. It was taken to different parts of the country, and the Freedom Charter was chalked out by having these meetings with people in the urban areas, rural areas. And with the Freedom Charter as a guideline, it was utilized by the organizations that were looking at change in this country as a guide. When we look at our current constitution, it is regarded as one of the best in the world. The rights of individuals, the rights of women, the rights of most important things in this country is respected. We are not a dictatorship, but we lack in many ways. And one of them is what Swamiji said. You got to have leadership with integrity. You got to have leadership with experience, and you got to have leadership with knowledge. You got to have people that are at the helm with integrity. And this is the challenges that we are facing. He himself said it, that you cannot put people there because they are your friends or because you have some obligation to them. And it's taken us 27 to 30 years for us to find out that this relationship of supporting each other is not good for governance, but it is actually very negative and detrimental to the country. Now, here's a man with vision who wrote in the 19th century as Satyar Prakash, and he's given us clear indication of how people should manage. And this is what should be actually given to many governments, not just to our government, but to many governments in different parts of the world, that this is how you should structure your political arena or your governance. Thank you.
Thank you, Panditji. There's just a few announcements, and we've just got a few more minutes.
Thank you. Sorry, Benji. You got one hand that's raised, and that's Vishnu from Trinidad. If you can allow him to say.
I don't see any raised hands on my side. Maybe on your side. Are you able to unmute?
Vishnuji, can you unmute and give your comment? Sorry.
Namaste, everyone. Thank you, Panditji. The question is, does this create a presentation, the framework of your presentation, does that also create a framework for the operation of Arya Samaj bodies throughout the world, in particular in any particular country?
Well, the Arya Samaj was founded by Swami Dayananda Saraswati. And when you look at the light of truth, it is his magnum opus. And we should be actually Arya Samaj structures, Arya Samaj work, Arya Samaj, the whole Arya Samaj should be focusing on what Swamiji stood for, and actually base our quality of life, propagation, teachings, education. And we are trying in South Africa. I know we are working at various levels. We work at a social level, we work at a political level, we work at an educational level, using Swamiji's guidelines. And hopefully we can make it happen. I cannot speak for other countries, but I know in South Africa, because we are quite involved with Arya Samaj South Africa, and our whole 10 principles of the Arya Samaj is based on what Swamiji stood for. And I think if we can just live that portion of our lives, especially the Satyar Prakash, and bring it into our lives, it'll make a better society and better people. Okay.
Sorry, Kiran Bhai, I think this is an appropriate time to suggest that the Arya Samaj should actually consider sharing this kind of information with the broader society in South Africa as a guidance to the electorate, because our democracy has gone wrong and we have elections coming up next year. And it would be very important for us to ensure that, we put the points about the qualities that you're looking for in leaders. We do have a situation where there's a number of people who continue to vote for the same leaders, whether they do the right things or the wrong things. And I think we need to develop the consciousness of people towards more discerning electorates, so that, the choice of looking at it and looking at, the independence of the judiciary that Swamiji actually raised, and respect for the rule of law. We need to start putting those things across, because, that's where things have gone wrong in South Africa totally. So if we play our role as the Arya Samaj, promoting righteousness and consciousness, I'm sure with Swami Dayanand's teachings, I'm sure we'll go a long way. Thank you.
Yes, I agree that we should be, we can use our platform, the Arya Samaj. And as you know, historically, the Arya Samaj has been part of the movement and the struggle. We have influenced thinking in various sectors in many ways. But I agree, maybe we should start linking up with different organizations that are progressive in their thought and thinking. And maybe we can start utilizing this information that we have in the way of running some workshops, or also just bringing some awareness of what democracy and what Arya Samaj stands for, and what the principles of the Arya Samaj is in terms of human rights, in terms of integrity, honesty, and also holding office, what it entails. I know for a fact that there is quite a lot of work being done in the launch of the Marxist series, and I'm sure you're aware of that. And we are in touch with some of the people that are part of that. You are part of it also, and you've been in contact. Maybe we can start influencing our thinking and also exposing Swamiji's thoughts in terms of his liberation and his progressive thoughts to people. I see we have some chat. Yeah.
Thank you, Panditji. We've just got like 3 minutes to go. And I think it's now time to close. And in closing, I'd like to quote Swami Dayanand Saraswati. And I quote, "When one Arya is alone, he should do self-reading. When two, they should ask questions and discuss answers within themselves. When more than two, they should do satsang and read any chapter of the Vedas." Unquote. And I think this is so important that we remember that. And that's the reason we have these lectures. And also, if we remember cast iron integrity, and it's incumbent upon each one of us to live in society and not just live off society. Every contribution, every individual counts. And also, the Arya Samaj South Africa hosts online satsang via Zoom on Sundays, and we request you to please attend. It is at 9 a.m. In addition, we do host other religious events, and invitations will be sent out in due course. Please look out for those, and please make yourselves available, and please attend these functions. In August, we have Swami Aryavesh, president of the Sarvadeshik Arya Pratinidhi Sabha, and Swami Aditya Vesh from India, who will be visiting South Africa. Please look out for those invitations, and we would like your support. Finally, I'd like to remind you that our next lecture will be on Saturday, 26th August 2023, and it will be the Pandit Nardev Vedalanka Memorial Virtual Lecture by Dr. Best. It's now we meet to part and part to meet. Until another time, we will close with Shanti part. Om Dyo Shantir Antariksham Shanti Prithvi Shantir Apa Shantir Oshadaya Shanti Vanaspatya Shantir Vishwadeva Shantir Brahma Shanti Sarvam Shanti Shantir Eva Shanti Sama Shantir Edi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.